Welcome to episode 111 of the Lowdown Radio Show presented by advrider.com. I'm Neil Graham. Have you noticed the price of fuel lately? Well, unless you're living like the Unabomber, of course you have. And since most of you have a motorcycle or two in the shed that most likely gets far better mileage than your car or truck, the time has come to save a little money and have a little fun. Why, just yesterday I took a 100-mile round trip to a car dealership for a new coolant reservoir. Once I was there, I stuffed it into my backpack like a high schooler with their homework, then wobbled off to a coffee shop to warm my hands. Did I mention it was 39 degrees? Our first guest this week knows all about pain. Duluth, Minnesota's Andy Goldfine, despite living farther north than even the most foolish of Canadians, rides as much as he can, as often as he can. And it's not just because he's cheap. Frugal is a kinder word. Andy knows the benefits of riding and is loath to abandon them the 8 months of the year when his homeland turns to barren, sinister, frozen tundra. Our second guest is ADV writer helmsman Zach Kurlick, who reminisces about dodging moose and deer on the way home from his turn-of-the-century gig as a newspaperman. And then I share my story of riding to a horrible summer job on an XT500 long before the turn of the last century. Add this week's episode up, and what do you get? The annual Ride to Work Day, which happens the second Tuesday in June, and which is spearheaded by Andy Goldfine himself, who, incidentally, has a designated winter commuting motorcycle. All this on this week's Lowdown Radio Show. When do you normally plant? Do you do sort of the May long weekend, the third week of May, or do you sometimes have to wait till June?
I don't know enough about planting to tell you the answer. I don't know.
All right, well, let's transition into something that you do know something about, which is the Ride to Work Day, which this year, 2026, happens on what day?
The 9th of June.
9th of June.
It's always on the 9th of June. Historically, we ended up picking another day that turned out to be the government created a new federal holiday that was overstepping on the original day that it was. And we moved it because the idea is riding a motorcycle to work. And if it's a federal holiday, a couple million people are not working that day. And we want as many motorcycles as possible to be in the traffic mix on this day, because Ride to Work Day its purpose is two things. One, it's to demonstrate that motorcycles in the United States and in North America generally, and rich parts of the world generally, that motorcycles are more than toys or recreational and sports vehicles, that there is a practical application. And I want to go on a little bit farther on this point because it's so important. In the parts of the world that are called developing or older parts of the world where cities are dense. There's really two kinds of cities in the world. One is cities that were built around the automobile, like Atlanta and Phoenix and Houston and Los Angeles. And then there's cities like Copenhagen or, I don't know, the cities across Asia and most of Europe and most of South America that were built before there were cars. So half of the American cities are built after cars and around using cars. But most of the world lives in cities that does not use cars as much. And motorcycles and scooters and bicycles fit in those cities really well. So people in those places, most of the world, they use motorcycles for utility as well as for recreation. Here in this country and in some parts of the world that were more recently developed, the infrastructure is around cars, and motorcycles are then shoved aside as recreational vehicles. And Ride to Work Day is to put more riders in the traffic stream to show that motorcycles are useful and fun.
Was this your idea? Did you start this, or was there someone else, or is this totally your thing?
It's not totally my thing. In the history, it was. I went to I think it was an AMA road race. It was in Brainerd, Minnesota, at the track up there, and in the infield, I was just walking around and I saw a bike that had painted, like brush painted, hand painted across the side of the gas tank, somebody's bike that said, work to ride, ride to work. And it was I took it as a parody of the Harley Davidson famous marketing credo, live to ride, ride to live.
Yes.
And I made a photo of it. And when I was riding back from the event, I was thinking that's really more true for me than the ride to work, work to ride thing. And so I made some stickers or a T-shirt to sell to our customers that said "work to ride, ride to work" on it. About at that same time, the editor of an American magazine called Road Rider, a fellow named Fred Rao, uh, I don't remember the exact sequence without looking in the records, but either he called me and said, "We want to do something with this." And I said, "Sure. How many T-shirts can I send you? How can I help?" Or he had written an editorial about the same time I was coming up with these stickers and these T-shirts that said there ought to be a ride to work day for the reasons that I just spoke about.
Yes, yes.
And the internet wasn't quite very far along at that time, but I realized that it was coming like gangbusters and that it would allow people to do flash mobs and do events that were synchronized across across the whole planet. And so it wasn't long after Fred wrote his editorial in Road Rider and we started selling these T-shirts all about the same time, influencing each other, that I decided we needed to put this on our website and try and create a global event. And let's see, how many years ago was that? I have to look now. It was a long time ago. That was 35 years ago.
So
So
what is your personal experience about riding to work? Now you rather famously live. You might be one of Duluth's most famous people right at this point. Certainly amongst motorcyclists.
don't slander Duluth like that. And Duluth is a big place. Somebody will take umbrage at that.
The- See, I've always thought of you as one of the founding fathers of Duluth.
Well, not quite. Duluth's an interesting place. Your audience, I'm sure, would have a good time if they came here in the summer on a motorcycle.
Definitely in the summer. But you
Yeah.
commute. But you commute in all weathers. And I want to ask you
Yeah.
a question about that. But you do commute all weathers,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
In winter?
Yep.
Still?
Took a long time to figure out how to do it, but I've got it down pretty good now. I didn't start the business commuting in the winter. Aerostitch makes riding suits, but it wasn't the idea of commuting in the winter that was appealing to me. That the awareness that I could figure out how to do it with the right bike and clothing safely, even though the climate's real harsh here and we have a lot of ice and snow in the winter. My commute's about 5.5 miles, all on surface streets, pretty benign roads. And I figured out about 10 or 15 years ago that I could figure this out. It took a number of years to become routine and have the right stuff hanging on a closed bar in my basement. And it took a while to figure out what the right bike was optimal for how I wanted to use it. So I now have a couple of bikes for the summer, sort of a little small quiver of commuting and long distance bike. And then in the winter, I have another bike that's basically just a winter bike. And the
What is your winter bike?
winter bike is I think I don't remember the year, but it's a model called a Suzuki Van. And most riders have never
Yeah.
heard of that.
With the
It
fat
is
tires.
It's a fat tire bike like the Yamaha TW200,
Yeah.
except sadly for Suzuki, they styled it like a retro bike, probably for the global audience that wanted a bike that looked like a 1970 motorcycle. And the TW is styled like a dirt bike and sold much better. So it was only on the U.S. market for a few years. The key feature that I was looking for, besides the lightweight and low saddle and big tires, was fuel injection, and that Yamaha version of this bike is carbureted, and the Suzuki the Van is fuel injected, which means, in a practical way, it will start at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty reliably. The TW probably won't do that. My
But
experience with carbureted bikes from Japan is they're not really great starters when it's really cold.
do you have any way of quantifying the success of Ride to Work Day? I mean, how do you know that other people are actually paying attention?
We've as I said a little while ago, this is a 35-year global deal so far, and, in the first 10 or 15 years, we tried to quantify it. We haven't done that in a long time, but what we used to do is go, like, on a Wednesday. If Right to Work Day is now on a Tuesday. So what we do for the first 5 to 10 years is we'd have people go on a regular Tuesday, like the week before Right to Work Day, and they'd stand on an overpass on a freeway and they'd count the bikes for an hour. And then the next week, when Right to Work Day came around, they would count the bikes. And if there was 33 bikes passing on the regular Tuesday and 74 bikes passing on the Right to Work Day Tuesday, we knew that it had increased the numbers of bikes on the road. We did that for a number of years. We got pretty consistent results. Um, but I don't think people ask the question how much of a difference it makes, and it's almost impossible to get any better quantification than just the anecdote that I just shared. That kind of there's no real way. We get pictures from people who work at large places of business. If a factory has 800 employees or a tech center or whatever, the riders who meet, let's say there's 4 or 5. Let's say you work at a place with 600 people, and on any given nice day, the bike area of that parking lot for that company will have 3, 4 riders in there, and they get to know each other because they're the guys that are showing up at that business
Yeah,
every
every
day
day.
on
Yeah,
bikes.
yeah.
And they talk about it, and they sometimes will put something on the company bulletin board or on the company's email forum, reminding all the other people who own bikes but don't commute on them that this coming Tuesday is Right to Work Day. And then that day, there might be 35 bikes instead of 5 or 6 in that big company's parking lot, and they'll line them up, and they'll stand there, and they'll take a picture and send it to Ride to Work Day, and we will post that. So we know that there's active organization at larger employers to get all the known motorcyclists to ride to work who don't normally ride to work by the 5 that do ride to work. And that happens all over the world.
So let's just say I led a different life and I had a proper education and I made a properly large amount of money and I had to go to work in, say, a suit. Can you think of anybody that makes a garment that would allow me to slip a garment over top of a suit and ride to work? Are you aware of anyone that does that?
Gee, what a good question. Yeah.
It's a
My
good
main
question, isn't it?
business my main business that is now 43 years along is called Aerostitch, and I founded it to make a coverall with armor, basically along the lines of a snowmobile suit,
Oh, what a coincidence.
but adapted for somebody like me who wants to ride to work wearing clothes like this without having to change into, 43. I grew up, and the model for what you wore for motorcycling was either, if you were serious and had money, you wore leathers. If you weren't serious, you had 2 choices. You could wear denim, which was terrible in the rain and which was not so good if you crashed at anything more than just a few miles an hour. And if you just wanted to look cool, you got a pair of sunglasses and a windbreaker with a racing stripe up the left side of it. And then you look like Steve McQueen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And those were the choices riders had. And I felt very much that I liked riding enough to want to put it into more days of my life as I went along. The first probably 5 or 6 years of my life as a motorcyclist, age 16, 17, 18, 19, people would see me riding around on a little Honda going to high school or whatever, and, they would say, "Are you still riding that motorcycle?" And I inferred that this was something based on that kind of feedback from the people around me, I inferred that I would grow out of this. And at some point in my 20s, I realized that that was never going to happen, at least not for me, and that I would be writing as long as I could for the rest of my life, and that it was something that was really good for me.
Mhm.
And the Aerostitch suit came out of that and a confluence of other things, but basically because I wanted to be able to ride more days of my life. That's what the suit is for.
So to wrap things up, so it's June the 9th, and where can we go to get more information if we wanna I mean, I don't know what more information you would need, just get your motorcycle and ride to work, but it's,
Yeah.
do you have a dedicated website?
It's www.ridetowork.org. It's a certain kind of a tax charity. If you want to send money, there's a way to do that. Um, the key though is, and the other things that riders can do to help motorcycling along is if you're doing Ride to Work Day and you know somebody else that's doing Ride to Work Day, call the local radio station and tell them you have a story for them, or the local TV affiliate. You have a story for them. The people who make television and make radio are always trying to find stuff like Ride to Work Day to sort of feed their beast. And this is a great story. Media loves motorcycles. They love motorcycles that are not the stereotypical Harley with no mufflers. They this is this If you're willing to put motorcycling in front of the public, just call a local station and you and your two friends who are riding to work and meet them at wherever, and they'll take movies of you and put you on the TV.
And of course, this year, because of what's happening politically and the price of fuel, it can be just a fuel economy thing can drive this, can it?
Yeah. Europe, for a generation, paid for their social programs. In Europe had a lot of social benefits. I don't want to go too political on this, but gas in Europe was always very expensive compared to American gas. And we're not used to this. We didn't set up our lives to have $5 gas. So
No, no.
this is a problem.
It's hard to feed the Dodge
Motorcycles,
Ram at $5 a gallon, it's hard to feed the Dodge Ram, isn't it?
it's hard to feed the BMW sports car. It's hard to feed anything that my motorcycles get. Are my motorcycle's a 650 one-cylinder Japanese bike that I've had for years, gets 60 miles to the gallon. And if you had a 400 or a 250, it's even better. When I was starting riding, all the 50 and 125cc bikes got 90 miles to the gallon, 100 miles to the gallon at surface street speeds.
We may well go back to that.
I I doubt it, but what do I know? Uh, in all over the world, where there's these older, densely populated cities with narrow streets that are built on a human scale, not a car scale, there everybody rides little 90 miles per gallon small bikes and scooters.
And riding a motorcycle, not only is it fun, and you get to feel like you're sticking it to the man, which for people like us is a
A
huge
big deal.
bonus,
Yeah,
a big
huge
deal. It's
deal.
a big
Yep.
deal. But also, it's a bit like cheating, isn't it? Riding your motorcycle to something sensible is a bit kinda like cheating in a fun way, like skipping
It's
school.
totally. And uh, Here in Minnesota, 2 years ago, they legalized lane filtering and lane splitting, and every time I was in Los Angeles, I did that, and it's absolutely feels like you're taking cuts or you're cheating, but it's safer to do it. Statistics now have shown that, lane splitting is actually safer than being in the traffic stream, and if I know people who have been in the traffic stream and then there's a construction zone or a delay up ahead and the cars accordion up together and the
Yeah.
person behind the rider smacks into the rider and hurts them. And so when you're filtering, that doesn't happen. So it is cheating, but it's an I think the governments of the world should incentivize the use of motorcycles because I think underneath the civilization we all have, there's a social contract that predates civilization, and writing helps nourish that behaviorally.
Well, those are really highfalutin ideas. And on that note, I think we should wrap this up. And
Thank you.
Andy, thank you. Ride to Work Day, June the 9th. And ridetowork.org if you're interested in more information. And tell a friend. And like reach out. Even guys that host podcasts are always looking for things to talk about. So anyone out there, reach out, spread the news, share the love. Andy, thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about Ride to Work Day. I really appreciate it.
Zach, I just talked to Andy Goldfine, of course, and we talked about how motorcycling in North America is really just for play, and that it doesn't really need to be that way. Now, of course, in February, where we live, motorcycle commuting is for a certain type of person. That person is not me. But using a motorcycle every day, and Andy and I mentioned this, if you kind of feel like you're getting away with something. So you have commuted on a motorcycle. What's your experience having done that?
Yeah. When I worked at the newspaper for several years, I worked the evening shift or early night shift, and I commuted to work every day on a motorcycle, every day from probably early April until late October. My rule was if it was below freezing at night, I had to be very careful and pick my days because you could go down a road that was perfectly safe in the afternoon, but if there was puddles that froze while you were at work and it got dark, then you could come to grief on the way home.
What time would your shift end?
I would get out of work around 10 after 11 or so. My shift ended at 11, so.
Right. And how far did you ride?
It was probably 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers, or 15 miles.
Yeah.
It was about a half hour or 20 minutes. No, it was a solid half hour on the motorcycle each way.
And was there something about doing that journey by motorcycle that felt different than if you took a car? I don't know. Did you even have a car at that point?
I had a car off and on. I also commuted while I lived in the city, which was perfect. You could kind of cheat a bit then. You could leave a little bit. You could commute earlier into the season because there was less mileage to cover because you were closer to work. So therefore you could take your chances with the weather. When I lived in the city, my commute ended with a ride under this bridge abutment where there was a homeless camp, and all the homeless guys would be sitting there drinking Colt 45, and they'd all wave at me going through, and I'd wave back and then go into work. But that was that was a while back now. I was just kind of bring back.
Maybe those guys thought he's going to be one of us one of these days.
They might not be wrong. Funny story. Okay, now this has nothing to do with motorcycling. My sister was a photography student when I was at the newspaper in those days. So her teacher said, as a assignment, you've got to go photograph a homeless person or someone dressed as a homeless person. So my sister, being shy, didn't want to harass a real homeless person. So she said, go take a picture of Zach. He'll dress as a homeless person. He'll do anything. So I said, sure, no problem. And I said, I know where they hang out and where they drink. I said, it's right under the bridge here at work. So I got myself all, it didn't take that much downgrade of my wardrobe to look like a homeless person. So I kind of made myself up and sat there and kind of bottle of Colt 45 for the photo and everything. She does all these photos in black and white, and she takes them back to class, and the instructor says, well, they're technically very good, but they're too realistic and depressing.
Oh man. Well, you can be I guess you can be too good, right? You can be just too good. Although, central casting would put you, I don't know, where would you fall? God, I hate to think where I'd fall in terms of character style.
Well, I'm too well rounded now to look like I was homeless. But
yeah, you're too.
Back then, I was
little.
Svelte.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, you're a little too. You look a little too prosperous.
Mm-hmm.
So on this ride of yours, I mean, night riding. Night riding still scares the shit out of me. I mean, I think. See, when I get tired and I'm riding at night, and when I ride at night, I'm always tired for whatever reason. Always have been, even when I was a kid. I would always see naked people running along the shoulder of the road. And that's when I knew I was about to crash. So get off the bike or get out of the car. But night riding really, really freaks me out. So, I mean, did you enjoy riding home at night?
Very much so. I usually took the highway to work because I was leaving at the last possible minute, so you take the quickest way to get there. But when I was on my way home, I always went the back road, and it was normally crowded during the day from being through like a busy community. But at night, there was nobody on the road. And I had every hill and every corner on that road. I knew it all like the back of my hand. And it was really fun. Get out of work at 11 o'clock. And the newspaper business was very deadline driven. But at 11 o'clock, it didn't matter if you had said that, the Pope was was a cross-dresser. Uh, it was on the press and it was printing. There was nothing you could do about it. Whatever you had done and said, you got in the motorcycle and you just went home, and it was great. Great way to get over that deadline stress.
That's what I miss about print is that when, there was such a finality. Of course, now with stuff online, you can go back in and edit and fix things. But there was something really cathartic about, and I think you agree, is that, when it was gone, it was gone. And it was just, at that point, when the magazine went out the door, it was dead to me. It no longer really existed. People would write in or make some comments about it, but, you'd always get a cursory glance when it came into the office. But there was such a beautiful sense of finality.
Yeah, I think that most people in the publishing business do not agonizingly read their published product the next day, and especially in the newspaper world. But no, that was a fun time in my life. Even though I didn't particularly enjoy that newspaper, there was some fun times on that commute. I'm thinking of one time in particular when I ended my commute and went home in a hearse.
Oh, do tell more.
I used to ride to work. I wasn't in all the gear all the time kind of guy. Okay, I would ride in my cargo pants and a pair of casual shoes and so on, as one does.
As one does. Yeah. You're a regular person.
Yeah, exactly. So I was riding along, and I had been off-roading at one point in the day and aired down my tire. And for whatever reason, hadn't aired it back up again. I blamed forgetfulness, but it could have been laziness. But the tire wasn't super low in pressure, but it wasn't, super high either. This is a while ago. So I have learned from this experience and others.
So hold your letters. Hold your letters.
Don't call in and say, this Curlick guy's an idiot. I mean, it's true, but I wouldn't do this again.
But don't base it on just the tires. Base it on a full body of work.
Yeah. my volume of work speaks for itself.
It really does.
So I was riding to work and thinking, I was on a little 200 dual sport at the time. We were testing it, and I was just riding along quite carefree through town, and all of a sudden, bam, my front wheel goes shockingly flat, and I'm in the middle of traffic, and I hit the brake or something. I don't know what happened, and crashed. Wearing my natty office attire, my Biz Kaz Friday wear. Well, I was in the middle of traffic. Thankfully, nobody ran me over. But peeled myself off the road and noticed that I was bleeding from several places. I had lost one of my shoes in the crash. Had to shamefacedly walk back and pick the shoe off the road.
Somehow this ties into the homeless thing under the bridge, doesn't it? The one-shoed man getting up off a crashed motorcycle.
It's all coming together.
Yeah, it's all coming together.
So this crash had occurred right in front of a funeral home. And the staff immediately streamed out from the entrance and were probably disappointed to see that they had not gained another customer, but instead I was sitting there, this bleeding mess. So they said, do you need a ride home? And I was like, I looked at the bike. I said, yeah. So they whipped the meat wagon around. Funeral homes have a hearse that's nice, and they have a hearse that ain't so nice to pick up the bodies. Yeah, well, I get driven home in the hearse, and the bike goes in the back. We just lifted her right in, put it back where the coffins normally sit. I sat up front with the hearse driver, and she drove me home, and all was well.
Oh, that's such a dripping with metaphoric imagery. The motorcycle in the back of the hearse. So you left the newspaper and you went on. You grew up in life, but you must have commuted somewhere else.
I did commute somewhere else. When I worked with Rob Harris at CMG. I would ride up to work at the office in Sackville, which was about 2.5 hours ride on the highway. I would ride up there every Sunday night, Monday morning, and I would come back every Friday night. I didn't have kids then, so my wife was, she would work during the week, and I'd go off and work too and come home. That was a different commute because it was about the same mileage as my daily commute, but it was all done in one big chunk at the start of the week and one big chunk at the end. And that was, there were some days that was very challenging. The weather, I would be riding along the Bay of Fundy, and you got to the point where you would gauge the trees along the side of the road. When you saw a break in the trees, you would kind of duck on the tank and hang onto the handlebars tight because you knew as soon as you hit that, this gust of wind would come blast you right across the lane.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then the trees would pick back up again, and you could carry on. I figured out that if I stuck to the farm roads, I could avoid that treatment. So I actually had a wonderful time riding the farm roads back and forth, but that added 2 hours to the commute. I did a lot of miles that way over the years as well, and enjoyed it, but developed a deep set hatred of the highway, as every motorcyclist should have. And that's also where I think it was the last time I was ever pulled over by a police officer for speeding. And in fact, the only time I've ever been pulled over on a motorcycle for speeding. I had I think it was a GS 1200. It was, I think, the first of the water boxers. And I was, of course, had forgotten my rain suit at the office, as one does when one has a 2.5 hour ride ahead of them. So I had noticed in my rearview mirror this approaching black cloud. And I thought to myself, well, I would prefer not to be caught in that with an hour remaining in my commute. So I laid the hammer down on this BMW, and I'm riding along the highway, and of course, paying no attention to the speed trap where there's always a speed trap. I got pulled over. And of course, this was a press bike. So I said, well, it is what it is. I'll pay my fine. The officer comes out of his cruiser and shuffles up to me, and I'm rummaging under the seat to try to find the documents from BMW, the ownership documents, because they're never readily accessible. And I'm sitting there rummaging under the seat. He's probably wondering if I'm trying to, retrieve a Glock or something like that. But anyway, eventually he figures out I'm just a clueless idiot, not a criminal, and comes up and he says, okay, where's your papers? So I give him my papers. He starts looking at them and says, well, you're not BMW Motorhead Canada. I said, oh, no, sir. I'm this hapless motor journalist, and was, I'm not trying to take advantage of it, but he just looks at this big mound of paperwork. And then he looks at this red sports car that goes flying by. And he says, you know what? Have a nice day. Shoves the papers back in my hand, runs back to his cruiser, jumps on, takes off after this red car. And I thought to myself, yeah, about 2 minutes down the road, I pulled past them, and there was the red car getting the ticket that I so richly deserved. It felt great.
I think my most memorable commuting experience, and this is something I wrote about for the biannual ADV Rider magazine, which you can get as a site supporter. Is that how I'm supposed to say it?
Yeah.
Yep. So I wrote a story about working for a guy. We drilled holes on top of bridges for resurfacing. So when a road would be resurfaced, often they'd resurface the bridge, but you have to physically bond the top to the bottom. So we drilled 2-inch diameter holes, 24 inches deep. Worst job I ever had. Painfully boring. You'd essentially sitting on a drill press all day. And, but I would ride to work, and we'd work at these various bridges all throughout the country. And I think it was my first sense, and I was a student in high school. It was my first sense of real autonomy, I think. I felt like a person going to a real job. I'd get up in the morning and fire up my XT500 and ride off. And I ate lunch under a lot of really beautiful bridges along some really beautiful streams for a whole summer. And it was just that idea of the end of the day was just this beacon of hope, because the job was so excruciating and the heat. But, when you got on the bike and you fired it up, and an XT500, to me at that point, it felt like the space shuttle. I mean, it was so fast compared to the little two-strokes I'd had, off-brand two-strokes. That just, riding home at 50 or 60 miles an hour on back roads with the wind. I mean, it was just an incredible sense of freedom. I don't know if I've ever quite had that feeling of ecstasy on a motorcycle ever quite since that. But it was a beautiful sort of early template for a love of motorcycling.
I can remember growing up in farm country, working farm jobs, and I was in college and university when I had my first motorcycles. But I very much remember the same thing. End of the day, it's hot. You get out of the warehouse where you've been stacking 50-pound bags of potatoes all day on pallets, and you throw your backpack over your back. I had a XS 650 then, and kick that thing over and take off home. It was just incredibly freeing. And I don't know if I've ever had any other motorcycle experience that offers the same amount of freedom for the least, or that little amount of riding.
Yeah, that's true. Zach, thank you for joining me. And as a reminder, Ride to Work Day is June the 9th, and ridetowork.org if you're interested in learning more or even donating a little money to the cause. ridetowork.org. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
Well, that's enough of that for this week. Thank you again for listening to the Lowdown Radio Show.